CBS Sports HQ is presented by Geico. Chris Hassel, joined by Pete Prisco.
That is me.
And Brady Quinn.
Yes. Where is he? Oh, the train.
Train got in the way. Brady Quinn joining us from his humble abode here as we move past mock draft season and move into power ranking season. Pete brought his brand new power rankings. This is officially the first power ranking
forward
for next season,
yes,
for the 2024 season after the draft. And obviously at the top, you've got the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time defending champs, followed by the San Francisco 49ers. But Pete, 49ers are favored at some of the books.
Well, and here's why. If you have to navigate through the AFC, you're going through a minefield. I mean, there's so many good quarterbacks, so many good teams. It's a lot easier to get to the Super Bowl in the NFC than it is in the AFC, and I think that's why the odds reflect that.
Former Kansas City Chief, Brady Quinn.
That's right.
Got him, right?
That's right.
I thought we had him.
I think we have him.
Brady? There he is, Brady Quinn, joining the program as we break down Pete's power rankings. You got to agree with that, right, Brady? Chiefs have to be number one.
You'd think that, but if I'm not wrong, I think last year, too, San Francisco was one of the favorites along with Philly in the early points of the year. So we've seen this before where the Kansas City Chiefs just don't seem to get their due respect. Now, Pete makes a great point. The AFC is much more of a gauntlet, or some people would say a much more difficult trip on the train to go in order to get to the Super Bowl. But in his own power rankings, 5 of the top 10 teams are NFC teams. So it does feel like there's maybe more parity than Pete wants to lead on here, at least in his own power rankings.
There's more good teams in the AFC. There are more good teams. I mean, there are some top-heavy teams in the NFC. Don't get me wrong. I think, and I'm bullish on the Green Bay Packers. I think the Lions proved last year how good they can be. But there are more good teams. You can go to the AFC North. I mean, there are 3 really good teams.
So you're saying there's more contenders, legit contenders in the AFC compared to the NFC?
Correct.
Okay, Chiefs
deeper.
number 1.
The pool is deeper.
You've got.
Can I ask this though?
Yeah.
Is this maybe the most dangerous version of the Chiefs that we've seen in a while? When you think about what they did this offseason, adding Hollywood Brown and drafting Xavier Worthy to go with Rashee Rice and the extension, or I guess I should say restructured contract for Travis Kelce, then with that defense, a defense that, if we really want to be honest, last year led the Chiefs. They were a defensive-led team. The offense showed up when it needed to, but that was not the most consistent part of their team. And as I look at this Chiefs team, this could potentially be the best version maybe they've ever had, Pete. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, if Xavier Worthy can give them a Tyreek Hill kind of vibe, then yeah, it could be. And you know, last year was the year to get the Chiefs, and nobody got them. That's the amazing thing. If you were going to get the Kansas City Chiefs, last year was the year to get them for the exact reasons Brady just described right there. They didn't have a great offense last year. They struggled for much of the season, but they have Patrick Mahomes. They figured it out, and the defense was outstanding. This team will be better than last year's team.
Feels like if anybody can get the Chiefs, it's the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow if he stays healthy. And here they are, below the Ravens, so you have it 3, but at number 7. Brady, this is going to be Joe Burrow's 5th season, so we're halfway to a decade. You know that's important.
What's surprising to me, that is important, obviously, for Pete's grand proclamation on draft night, winning multiple Super Bowls, he said, in 10 years. We're halfway there. What's surprising is he's got them at 7. Like, if Joe Burrow is healthy, I'm sorry, I would put them ahead of the Baltimore Ravens. That's just how good I think they can be. And I'm assuming, too, T. Higgins is a part of this group, along with Jamar Chase, a wide receiver, and Jermaine Burton, who they added in the draft this year. They shored up the offensive line as well. That was a bit of a concern. Not so much anymore. Now, the defense, we'll see what they do with Trey Hendrickson, who said he wants to trade. He's arguably their best defensive player, and at times I think that's been their weak point. But to me, if Joe Burrow's healthy, he is kind of the Kansas City Chiefs slayer to a degree, or at least the quarterback that I think has given Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs the most trouble. So I think they should be much higher on this list, assuming Burrow's back healthy.
Well, I mean, the Ravens are the same Ravens team, if not better than they were a year ago, and they're going to be right there as well. And look, it's splitting hairs. That's going to be a good division. I think those two are going to fight it out in the division.
But you also had the Bills ahead of the Bengals.
Because you know why? I'm not giving up on the Buffalo Bills.
You're not burying them yet?
No,
you're not taking the shovel out?
They still have Josh Allen Allen, and they're going to be right in the mix again. And everybody likes to say, oh, well, they lost so many guys last year. They didn't have a lot of guys last year. You know, people forget the defense was decimated by injuries the entire season at all levels across the board. They lost their best run stuffer early in the year. He came back, Daquan Jones. Then you lost your linebacker, Milano. He went out. And you lost your corner, your starting corner, Tre'Davious White, for the year. The safeties were in and out. The entire Von Miller was a shell of himself. The entire year was lost on the defensive side of the ball. And if Josh Allen hits the shot in the back of the end zone, he doesn't get, influenced by the pass rush, they win that game against the Chiefs. And we're maybe talking about a Super Bowl team. So they'll be right back in the mix.
Brady, where would you rank? Pete's got the Ravens on top there behind the Chiefs. Chiefs, Ravens, then the Bills, then the Bengals. How would you rank those if you had your own power rankings?
He doesn't.
I'd put the Bills ahead of the Green Bay Packers. I'd probably put them at somewhere around the 6th spot. I might even put Detroit back a little bit further. So maybe I'd have the Bills probably at 5. I've had Cincinnati at 3, and I'd have the Baltimore Ravens at 4. I mean, look, I think the AFC North is the best division in the NFL, so I have a lot of respect for them given my time playing there too. But I would say the AFC, to Pete's earliest point, is the most dominant, and it should be a little bit more top-heavy, at least in the beginning of his rankings with AFC teams, in large part because of Josh Allen, because of Joe Burrow, because of all the quarterbacks that they possess. So I'd have this ordered up a little bit different, but much more in favor of the AFC teams.
By the way, he did pick the Bengals to win the Super Bowl last year.
He did?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
You've never picked the Bengals to win the Super Bowl.
Never picked them, Pete.
Even though you haven't won it twice in a
Well, you know what? If they block Aaron Donald,
Yeah.
for one play, they win the Super Bowl. But that's a whole nother story.
By the way, you're so bullish on Josh Allen and the Bills. Why do you pick them to win a Super Bowl?
Because I'm always picking the Chiefs now. How can you pick against
No, you're
the
not.
Chiefs?
You picked the Jags to win the AFC last year.
And how'd that work out for me? You start out by picking the Chiefs, and then you work your way down. How could you pick against the Chiefs? You can't pick against Patrick Mahomes.
So that's the top 10. We've hit on a few of those teams. Let's move past 10, where you find the Jets at 11. Pete, you say in your article at CBSSports.com, this has to be the year. They have all the pieces. So I ask, the year for what? Like, what's the line of demarcation? Is it Super Bowl championship or bust, or is there a spot that they can make it to divisional round championship game where you say, yes, that's a success?
Well, the pressure is clearly on Robert Saleh. I mean, there's no question about it. He has to win this year. And what does that entail? Does it mean getting to the postseason and losing a wild card game? No, I don't think that saves his job. I think they need to go deep into the postseason, maybe into the championship game. If they do that, he'll be around next year. For Aaron Rodgers, how much longer is he going to play? That's the question. Is he going to play past this year? Who knows? We never know with him. You have to go all in, and by that I mean all in means getting to a Super Bowl, at least for this team.
Getting to the Super Bowl.
To the Super Bowl. They've made some nice additions in the offseason. They've solidified the offensive line if guys stay healthy, and that's the key. Health is so important for them. If they stay healthy, they're going to push. They can push Buffalo in the division, and they can push for even more once they get in because they do have Aaron Rodgers.
I know why you rank them where you rank them, Pete, but I got to be honest. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy and able to play even close to the way we saw him play during the end of his career in Green Bay, this to me is another team that I'd throw right up there amongst the rest in the top of the AFC. Their defense has been stout despite the issues with quarterback. We've seen that before. They've got a bunch of playmakers, just they haven't had a quarterback to consistently distribute the football to them. You talked about shoring up the offensive line. They've done that. I understand there's a lot of pressure on this team going into this year because it feels like it's a boom or bust year for Robert Saleh and the New York Jets, but I think they're going to be more boom than bust with Rodgers back healthy and the team around him. Quite possibly one of the better teams he's ever had around him. It just happens to be in a much tougher conference to navigate, and probably even to some degree a much more difficult division to navigate given where the AFC East is at this point with Buffalo, with Miami, and wherever you want to talk about New England, but it's still New England. I still give him the benefit of the doubt as compared to the years sometimes he was there in the NFC North.
But there are ifs, and he's a big if. Is he going to be the same guy? We don't know. We're assuming he will be. Yeah, we don't know. The left tackle, Tyron Smith, he's in and out of the lineup all the time. I mean, so there's a big if there as well. Those are two very important positions for a team. So I'm with Brady. If everything works out, they're going to push for a deep playoff berth. They really are. I think they can be that kind of team.
They drafted Olu Fashanu. I mean, he's arguably one of the best tackles in the draft. I mean, even if Tyron Smith can't go, they've got his replacement in waiting.
Well,
So
they have
I
a
feel like
question
they're
mark at
pretty well
right
set.
tackle with Morgan Moses, too. I mean, they have issues.
You're calling him a question mark, but it's probably more of a little bit of an upgrade. And even if there's issues with Rodgers potentially, he goes down for a few games, they've kind of shored up their backup quarterback situation with Tyrod Taylor, who's a much more experienced vet, and I think gives them a better shot of winning games if Rodgers is out for whatever reason. So
if they're playing with Tyrod Taylor, they're going to have a new coach the following year. I promise you that.
And look, that may be the case, but if they play with him for 3 or 4 games, I think he can hold the fort down until Rodgers will be able to come back. The general point is something that you said. I'm trying to agree with you, even though you just want to argue about everything.
I'm not arguing.
They did shore up this roster.
I'm not arguing at all. I'm just pointing. I got to point out the negative realities of things sometimes. Nobody else.
You have
does.
some epic battles arguing with yourself in the mirror, don't you, Pete?
I do. I love arguing with myself.
Here's a positive.
You know what? I win all the time too.
They're ranked 4 spots ahead of the Dolphins in your power rankings. Let's move down into the 20s. The Atlanta Falcons 4 spots behind the Bucs in that division, even with that great 2-headed monster at quarterback.
Well, which one of them is going to rush the passer? That's what I want to know. Which one? I mean, they did add a pass rusher that I like in Trice, and Brady mentioned him yesterday. But the bottom line is, I still think Tampa's a better team. I think, look, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins a little bit better, marginally better, but not by much. I think the Tampa roster is better. They have people who are going to take the next step. They have a lot of young players who played last year. They're going to be better. They did bring their veterans back. I think getting Levante David and Mike Evans back into the fold is good for that organization.
You disagree with the odds here. I mean, the odds say Falcons.
Well, I'm a trend bucker, in case you're wondering.
I mean, they're supposed to win 2 more games, according to Vegas.
I don't see that. I mean, look, again, I know there's not going to be a lot of big games early in his career for the Atlanta Falcons, but we know there might be late in the season. We know how those usually work out for Kirk Cousins.
Pete, you've never been trendy in your life, so don't worry about it. No one's following your trend, buddy. This, to me, is the biggest disgrace on this entire list. Pete has tried to act like he's a supporter of Kirk Cousins because at times he's played at MVP level. Even last year before he got injured, he probably would have been the MVP if he stayed on that track. And Pete had the hardest time of saying he was wrong about Kirk Cousins. Now this is his opportunity to take a shot at Kirk for whatever reason. That being said, it's a disgrace that he doesn't have this team higher. They've got the skill position players. Their defense was much better last year and much improved with Raheem Morris calling the defense. I think they'll be fine. You talked about Braylon Trice. Let's not forget they got Brandon Dorless, too, in the interior of that defensive front, which was great value when they drafted Dorless to help out with Grady Jarrett. But this is a team that I think with Kirk Cousins at quarterback is going to be a double-digit win team. They're going to make the playoffs, may even win the division, and they could potentially go on a run. So I disagree with Pete in a big way on this one. Atlanta would be one of the better teams in the NFC this year.
How was I wrong about Kirk Cousins? I said he had a good year. He's a good quarterback. But what I'm not wrong about is he doesn't.
On him forever.
He doesn't play well in the big games and the big moments. You can't argue that. Can you argue that he's played well in the big moments and big games, Brady?
He got a big-time road win and a comeback win over New Orleans on the road when it was in Minnesota.
One time.
He could do it.
One time.
And so what? We're supposed to buy into the Bucs?
He said, yeah, buy into the Bucs.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. Wait a second. Let's just go back on that statement.
I think Baker Mayfield have as many? Baker Mayfield has more playoff wins than Kirk Cousins does, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't he?
We'd have to go back and look. I know they had the big win versus Pittsburgh, and he won in
the postseason with the Cleveland, and he won last year too. Remember, he beat the Eagles.
Use the D word twice to describe you.
What?
Disgrace.
Who?
Disgraceful.
Well,
that you put the Falcons 20th.
Yeah, I'm not all in on that.
Hey, let's bet, Pete. Let's bet the Falcons go to the playoffs this year.
We will. Okay. Don't worry, we will.
All right, let's move on to the bottom 5, where despite using a pick like the Falcons did, a pick on a quarterback in the top 12, the Broncos, who took Bo Nix 28th overall.
Yeah, and look, I think it's going to take a little while for Bo Nix, and I'm not as negative on Bo Nix as most people are. I mean, I think his arm strength isn't great, but he'll get better. He's smart. I think in that system it will work. It's just going to take a little time. And by the way, that's not a loaded team when it comes to talent. They have issues on that roster. So I think it's a challenge, and they didn't have a lot of draft picks. Obviously, the last couple of years they traded them away for Russell Wilson. So it's not a great roster, which I think in that division, you look at it from top to bottom. Could they sneak ahead of the Raiders? Maybe, depending on what happens with the quarterback. And you guys know how I feel about Minshew, and does he even win the job? And then you know, they're not going to be ahead of the Chargers, I don't think, at the end, and I don't think they're going to be ahead of Kansas City either.
It's interesting you've got them this low, though, Pete. I mean, I know a lot of it probably has to do with the division, as you kind of touched on. They play and probably play in the AFC as well, which makes for a more difficult schedule. But they're not that devoid of talent. I mean, as of right now, we're assuming Cortland Sutton's there. They've got Mims. They drafted your guy, Troy Franklin, who you were really high on. You had him in the first round of one of your mocks. Vele, I think, is a value pick as well at the wide receiver spot. And I think they're going to want to run the football. It's part of the reason why they drafted Audric Estime to be more of a battering ram there. So I'm not as down on this team. I think they improved mightily defensively over the second half of the season. And I think with Bo Nix, he'll pick up this offense quick. I know you've kind of questioned his football IQ maybe, or how prepared he is. That was one of the attributes that Sean Payton was drawn to most and why they took him where they took him. So I think they'll be more competitive than maybe you give them credit. And I think they'll be better than the 28th team when it's all said and done next season.
Who questioned Bo Nix's football acumen?
You asked if he was similar to Drew Brees as far as football IQ, and
he's not. And he's not.
Coming out of college, I think they might be on a similar path there.
Oh, please. No, he's not. And by the way, you keep saying, okay, I'd move him up. Who are you moving him ahead of? That's, you know, you always say they should be higher. Who are they ahead of? On my rankings right there.
I'd move him ahead of the Raiders.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think they're better.
Okay,
you're bullish on Gardner Minshew. I'm surprised.
You're the one that's supposed to be not as big of a fan.
That's what I think about this Broncos roster. I don't think it's very good. I just don't.
Low IQ for Bo Nix?
No, that's not what not once have I said that. I just said he's not Drew Brees, and he's not.
It's disgraceful that you would say that about a young man. Pete is going to be on the Pick Six podcast today.
Yeah.
With Will Brinson and John Breach. And among other things, this is going to air live on CBS Sports Network from 2 to 3 Eastern. If you miss it there,
I'll be sitting in a comfortable chair when we do it.
Among other things, you're going to discuss draft fits. Not like where they fit on the team, but like the outfits that the guys wore at the draft.
Oh, I can't wait to rank those fits. It's right up my alley. It's in a runway grading.
I can't wait.
Fit.